Welcome to the Irish NFL Show in association with QuinnBet. We are taking a quick time out from our playoff coverage to look at some of the developing news around the NFL for the teams that didn't make the big dance but are trying to hire the coaching candidate they hope will get them to the playoffs in years future. And we start, Brian, with your beloved Giants, who've hired probably the best guy available in the coaching carousel, and that they've got John Harbaugh. The Ravens' loss, if they view it as a loss, very much New York's gain.
Yeah, as you can imagine, the last few days have been quite exciting for all Giants fans. I think we spoke during the week about the enormity of trying to get this decision right. It's been, tried and tested in terms of bringing in up-and-coming offensive coordinators. That it's time to try to find someone that has great experience around the league, can take ownership of a locker room, get the respect immediately. Players he'll expect big things from every player, and they won't. There's too many things over the course of the last 3 years have come and gone, and players seem to just have to come and go and do what they please. But I think that's going to significantly change under Harbaugh. And it was interesting over the course of the last few days, people were kind of panicking slightly over his contract. That was all of a sudden the biggest talk of the town outside of the playoffs. Oh, why haven't they, concluded this deal? But having spoken to 2 beat writers, they said the longer this goes, the better for the Giants, because Harbaugh was making sure that everything that he expected and demanded from the owners was going to ring true. He's going to report directly to the owners. Don't know necessarily what that means for the GM, bearing money on his last year of his contract, but for Giants fans, it's exciting times again. And it's long overdue, Conor, because I know the off season is quite long. You got free agency, the draft, but this kind of gives everyone a bit of a spring in the step now.
I don't read too much into that reporting to the owners, but to me, that was John Harbaugh is in a position to demand that because he's John Harbaugh. He's literally the most in-demand candidate in the cycle. You could argue the toss over whether the Ravens were right to get rid of him or not. In terms of his staff as well, the thing about hiring early is that he's going to have his pick of the best assistant coaches available. Like, who doesn't want to work for him and who wouldn't want to work in that New York job, in that market? Because it could be the springboard for something great for anybody who signs on as OC or DC or any of the position coaches to come with them.
Yeah, by all accounts, we've seen the list of of coaching staff that they're suggesting, and every single one is like, okay, I can understand the narrative and the argument as to why that would take place. I think you touched on it during the week when we spoke briefly on Todd Monken and the likelihood he will come in as offensive coordinator, and we spoke for that particular year where Lamar was...
If you're Todd Monken, by the way, if John Harbaugh asks you to join his staff, you kind of are duty bound to, right? I mean, basically, one of the reasons he got fired is because he wouldn't let the owners fire Todd Monken. He stood up for Todd Monken as offensive coordinator, which I thought stood very well to Harbaugh and was arguably the right thing to do. Like, why should they fire the offensive coordinator? The reason the offense wasn't working is because the quarterback was injured.
Well, we're 2 years removed, not even 2 years removed from when he was MVP of the league, and we spoke glowingly about the job in which Monken had done when he got in and it transpired that in that particular period, Lamar had the best game and the best career of his career to date. We saw him in London. I know it's a couple of years, but me and you spoke on the way home from that particular game about how much what he was doing to
I remember gushing at the time, even in that early part of that season, because you could see how it had evolved from the Greg Roman offense, and you could see all of the things that became hallmarks of that Monk and Lamar connection, which was them using him cleverly to kind of fake out defenses, like them using the fact that you had to account for Lamar as a runner to actually open up more options in the passing game. It was really clever. It was explosive. It took them damn close to actually winning the whole thing.
One game away from being in the Super Bowl, an unfortunate defeat to the Chiefs. And unfortunately, fortunately for John Harbaugh, I suppose, in some ways, that is the issue here, isn't it? Like you touched on 18 seasons with the Ravens, 12 playoff appearances, they win a Super Bowl, but over the course of the last 3 or 4 years, they've been very much in win now mode. And I suppose the Ravens probably feel at this stage we need someone else, a fresh face, to take us over the hump. For the Giants, Jackson Dart for me is the biggest winner here. You spoke with Lamar. Jackson Dart this season has frustrated fans. Like, we all see the talent, but we spoke time and time again about the fact that he wouldn't go off the sideline, and he's similarities in terms of his game to Lamar. But I think now under Harbaugh we might see more of a kind of combination of him evolving into the quarterback that we believe he can be, and a bit more consistency around what he needs to do.
Arguably, Shane, the next best candidate available in the coaching carousel is also gone, because Kevin Stefanski has been hired by the Atlanta Falcons. I love this hire for them. I love it for him as well. We talked about how attractive this division is because it's so eminently winnable. The last time we sat here in the studio, you were polling hard for the Saints as the breakout team next year. You don't really need to do much to break out in the South. Falcons probably have the best collection of talent if you can rely on Michael Penix when he comes back from injury. What the Falcons are betting on is that Stefanski can achieve what he managed to do in Cleveland, where he had no quarterback, develop the one that he has there at his disposal in Atlanta and put them over the top. The Panthers may not be as strong as they were this season. The Saints we're not sure. Tyler Shuck has had a pretty good rookie season, and they do have talent there. And the Buccaneers are up and down. So why shouldn't it be the Falcons next year?
Yeah, and this is the interesting thing. I mean, like when Raheem Morris was fired as head coach of the Falcons, it happened on the Sunday afternoon. The Falcons are definitely moving quick, and once again, they're moving quick here. I think they're sensing that urgency in the fact that, look, 3 teams finished the NFC South in 8-9 this year. There's no reason why they couldn't have been the ones trying to put up to the Rams in the wildcard round. What I like about this, though, is, look, people may be questioning about whether Morris was, whether they sacked him too early and all this kind of thing, but once they make the decisive pick to go for the best candidate available outside of John Harbaugh, who I think was very much being New York's man from very early in this process, I don't think anybody else really had the opportunity to actually go and get him in the way that the Falcons spent way too long interviewing candidates last time. I thought they've gone straight in. And what I like about this is, look, the biggest problem with Cleveland over the course of Stefanski's era is just the lack of quarterback and lack of talent he had to work with on the offense, which is his baby. Yet the defense is able to still run off and become this fantastic juggernaut. And the same formula is there in Atlanta, and that the defense is pretty well stacked. You find the right defensive coordinator just to work with the talent there, and that, from his point of view, some looks after itself. But I think he's working within a better organization. We know Matt Ryan is coming in there as president of football operations, so they're obviously changing the way that they are evaluating talent and looking to bring in people. So I think this is just an overall sort of top to down cultural and organizational change in the Falcons, who know that look, some teams need a rebuild and they have to try and tear everything down. They're not in that situation, but there's definitely a cultural shift here, because the talent they have there is by far the best in the NFC South. It was execution that was letting them down consistently. We saw that in Germany in a game where they had a chance to win, but they kept putting themselves in these very, very close situations and finding ways to lose. Now, Stefanski, we saw the great job he did in the Joe Flacco year a couple of years ago in terms of trying to bring a Cleveland team who had every reason to not progress but keep moving them forward and instill belief. He's definitely the kind of coach I think would have a good early impact as opposed to being a sort of long-term 5-10 year plan like we're seeing with Harbaugh. Am I right in saying that Harbaugh deal is a 5-year, $100 million? Yeah. Like we're not seeing that with Stefanski. He's very much get in there. We're in a situation where we need a quick impact now and push forward. That's what the Falcons are looking for. I think he's the right man to do it.
Brian, no new hire in Green Bay, but an interesting renewal as Matt LaFleur signs on to a new contract. There was a lot of question marks and a lot of fan discontent in Green Bay. They're an impatient fan group by their nature. They want Lombardis. They want success right now. Getting to the playoffs and losing is not where Green Bay wants to be. He's been there the last 4 years and only won 1 playoff game. He has 2 championship games under his belt. He's gotten close. He's a widely admired coach around the league. And you got to feel that Green Bay looked at this and thought, well, firstly, the nature of that franchise is they don't make knee-jerk decisions and they're not going to respond to any sort of populist uprising. Secondly, if they get rid of Matt LaFleur, like who would realistically replace him? So for all the criticism he's faced, he's probably the right man for that job. Yeah,
you touched on it there, the fact that they don't panic. They look at the situation as a whole over the course of the season. Yeah, you could argue 7th seed any year is not really satisfactory for the Packers. 3 out of 4 last 4 years. If there was no 7th seed on the old structure, they wouldn't be in the playoffs. Excuse me. However, you touched on it there. Where would they have gone? Well, he would have been picked up tomorrow immediately. There'd be people hanging out the door to have him as their head coach, and rightly so, because he's a fantastic talent. I think ultimately for Packers fans, they're growing the discontent over what happened over the course of the last month in particular, to give away 2 games to their fiercest rivals. That kind of overwhelms Packers fans into thinking it's time to move on and find another head coach. But in the light of day, I think they'll acknowledge and recognise he is the best man to be there. Like when you think 3 or 4 years ago when Aaron Rodgers was moving off and Packers fans were disgruntled, but was it the right thing to do? And has Jordan Love lived up to the hype? Probably not, but the consistency is still there. They're still challenging every year within the NFC North.
We can look at some of the other blue chip jobs, Shane, like the Steelers job, for instance, which is probably the most interesting one still left on the table, with the fact that they've only had 3 head coaches since 1969, probably the biggest pressure factor for anybody who's going in there. The Titans, though, were the first team to fire their coach during the season and are still without coach.
Yeah, this is what I'm finding difficult to understand, because in comparison to what we've seen in Atlanta, they made a decision quick, they found their man to get them. Tennessee have had the longest run in to try and find somebody here, and it seems that the breadth of candidates they're going for, you're not even quite sure who the person is they're looking for, other than the fact that they're clearly looking for an offensive head coach. Jason Garrett was was in the running when we were speaking here a couple of weeks ago. Potentially he could move from NBC back into coaching in Tennessee. Brian Daboll, of course, being an offensive-minded person, being in there. Mike McDaniel, we know, is still sort of shipping himself around after being let go in Miami. We know that he's in the running there. But it all just seems so unclear as to what the move is for them. I almost feel like they should have just done what everyone else tries to do and just try to find somebody from the McVay tree and just bring them in and move forward.
Maybe not let go of the head coach they had that went to the Patriots and now has the Patriots in the divisional round. Maybe that would have been an option.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Not that I'm exactly complaining about that, but yeah, like this is the frustrating thing. I think that if you're Cam Ward, where is your confidence in where your future is going here? Because we've seen a lot of these teams who have young quarterbacks and decided to make hay when the sun shines. And the Giants are doing that at the moment. The Patriots did that last year. The Bears did that last year. The Jaguars have done that with not necessarily a young quarterback, but they've tried doing that over the course of their tenure to try and make the most out of Trevor Lawrence in their own division. The Texans, we know, obviously making the most of CJ Stroud, but CJ Stroud and DeMeco Ryans era started at the same time. I don't see the rush in Tennessee, and this is a cultural problem with them. Mike Vrabel, we know, when he left, there's a general rift between those two anyway, and maybe some people were saying, look, that the Vrabel situation there was kind of coming to the end of the road anyway. But one of the sticking points was that it seemed that the focus inside the building in Tennessee was not necessarily on winning or winning in the best way. We've had beat writers onto this show talk about the fact that Tennessee just cannot keep hold of the talent that they draft and build it up, and that means that you've no culture. It's difficult to get any continuity. What is your team that you're building around? Cam Ward there is a fantastic prospect for you to build your team off of. But where is the organizational heft to try and come in and say, we need to try and get the best person possible now? Because, this is my fear, for most of the period when the Titans have been trying to build their new stadium, they haven't been focusing on football enough, I don't think. They've been focusing on trying to get the stadium done, and it looks like a fantastic stadium. We're hoping it'll be hosting a Super Bowl in the next few years. Looking forward to seeing that when it opens. But when it opens, I'd like to see a good football team playing in there. And I think this the lack of urgency here is frustrating.
Finally, Brian, before we wrap, one of the things that's defined this coaching carousel, arguably, and fully a quarter of the teams, of course, looks to replace their head coach, is something that Shane touched on there. You have two teams still in the playoffs, in the Bears and the Patriots, who went from last to first over the course of one season with the right hire. A lot of owners out there and GMs are hungry, looking, you can completely transform the destiny of your franchise in 1 year if you get it right. Why wouldn't they look to recycle their coach?
Yeah, and last year Dan Quinn took the Commanders, who had struggled, and they were picking second in that particular draft, and they find themselves in the NFC Championship game. So absolutely, it's a very win-now feel about it. And even a couple of weeks back, people were suggesting it wasn't like the dynamics of last year where you had two leading candidates in Vrabel and Johnson, and we're not going to see teams quickly get out there and get the right coaches. And obviously things have evolved very quickly in terms of John Harbaugh coming available, Kevin Stefanski becoming available. But they are the leading candidates. So it doesn't come as a surprise that within a week that they've been hired. But now it's a case of where does the next team go? And you're looking at the Titans. There's other teams like in there that we haven't even discussed. What are the Browns doing? What are the Raiders doing? There's so many, just on 8 teams. It's kind of a record to see what's, a year in which we have so many positions available. And you said the Steelers, that's the biggest conversation, because whoever goes in there has a huge job ahead. Not necessarily to get this team challenging, but to deal with the enormity of coming in after Mike Tomlin being there for so long.
Well, once they hire and once those other vacancies are filled, you can be sure we'll bring you the latest developments here on the Irish NFL Show.